planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet
Earth.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet stupid.
No. It's the planet stupid.
Oh, delighted to have her back with us. Belinda Weymouth, everyone. Hi, Belinda.
Hello.
All
How
right.
are you all?
We are very well, and we're better for the fact that you have returned to the fold with us because you were away for too long.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy to be back, and I have some good news, especially for a heating planet. We're going to start with water, but we're going to get to something that could be really groundbreaking as far as all the heat that's in the atmosphere and the water and is making these hurricanes so awful.
So please start where you want. Let's get to it.
Okay. Well, environmental hero Joe Biden yesterday announced the lead and copper rule, which is really amazing because this is going to phase out all the lead pipes that we have left in our water supply. And it's so important, especially for children. It's enormous. It's a really, really big deal. So what happened a decade ago, we had the crisis in Flint, Michigan, and it really sort of raised awareness like, oh my goodness, these water pipes, these old municipal water pipes are lead, they're bad, we need them to go. And they knew 40 years ago, that these pipes were bad and we needed to do something about it. And what they said 40 years ago was, okay, no more lead pipes in new construction. But that didn't mean that the pipes that were going to be supplying your home, the municipal pipes, were being replaced. So the water is still, coming through lead pipes and then into your nice new pipes into your home. But the awful thing is there are still, 9 million people who have lead piping. And what Biden did with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, they earmarked $9 billion worth of money to, or subsidies, worth of subsidies, I should say, not worth money, because that is money, $9 billion. So $9 billion in subsidies to replace lead pipes. And this is huge because lead is a neurotoxin. And it's particularly potent for young children who have, developing brains. So there are all these things that we know that lead contamination does. And it's not good for adults either. It causes cancer and, heart disease, and it lowers kidney function. So this is a really, really big deal. And thank you, President Biden, for doing this. I just have to give him a shout out. And, I sent a link because I think this is really important to sort of illustrate how awful lead is. So in the 1970s, when they de-leaded our gasoline, when they took the lead out of gasoline, violent crime was seen to go down. There was a correlation. Now, it didn't happen immediately, but when you look at the cohort of children born, sort of 60s, 70s, drinking water that came through lead pipes when they were young, when it got to the 1990s and the 2000s, you can see that there was when you look on a graph, and I sent the link to the graph, it's a U shape, an inverted U shape, and as the exposure to lead goes down, so does violent crime. And the thing that's wild about this, Mark, is they have done this research all over the world, and it happened in the UK, it happened in New Zealand, Australia, after the US. The US was the first country that said, hey, we've got to get the lead out of gasoline. And they're not saying, they're saying right now, okay, this is a correlation, we can't say it's causation, but the fact that it happens, and you can go neighborhood by neighborhood as well and see, this happening. And so the removal of lead is huge. And one of the things that Biden wants also is he said, hey, we have to test the water going into elementary schools, into daycare facilities. He's really looking out for little kids. And he's lowered the amounts of lead that are allowable in drinking water from 15 parts per billion down to 10 parts per billion. And the thing that's really important, and I just want to stress this because this is important, these regulations are put there for a reason, obviously. And the Clean Water Act of 1974, there are provisions in it that mean that whoever gets into the White House after Biden, they cannot turn back these regulations and these provisions that are made to make it safer. There are actually safeguards in place for a rule like the lead and copper rule that he's just enacted. And this is very important because, we saw with the first Trump presidency that what he did was, when he wasn't able to overturn regulations, he really made it hard for regulatory bodies to do their job. The EPA was absolutely understaffed. And then he put Scott Pruitt in charge of it. And I just have to repeat these two little bits of information, because I think you couldn't make this stuff up. And I think it's super important. So Scott Pruitt, spent $43,000 building that soundproof phone booth so that when he was in, EPA headquarters, he could be making, whatever kind of nefarious deals he was trying to make in his sound.
Right, it was in his office. That's exactly
ridiculous.
Right.
And then he found out that he was sending limousines around Washington and other places to buy, fancy lotions that when he'd stayed in these hotels, he and his wife had liked, and he wanted to buy them, and he was using government resources to do that. So you don't want a head of the EPA who's up to that sort of shenanigans. You want
it was just to start with. He was a lobbyist, I believe it was a coal lobbyist.
Yeah.
Before he was EPA chief. I mean, he was suing the EPA for most of his life, his professional life. As a coal lobbyist, and then he gets in and he's head of the EPA. I mean, it's absolutely, crazy. And then, as you say, he ultimately had to resign because of ethics scandals. The guy was completely unethical to the point, and that's in the Trump administration where you can pretty well get away with whatever you want, but he was even too much for them.
Yeah. And so this is just, a word to voters, clean water for children and for us, that should be a bipartisan issue, I mean, this is super, super important. We all deserve to have clean water to drink. So just take this piece of information and this new rule and just, think about it, put it in the, the think tank.
It's terrific. It's terrific. Absolutely. I mean, and I think you rightly remind us occasionally, and maybe more than I hear in the public discourse, that Biden, as much as he's an institutionalist, I kind of continue to think of him as like a mainstream institutionalist in Washington. He likes the systems that are there. He really did a great job in terms of making some real transformative legislation related to the environment.
Yeah, the environment is super important to him. If he hadn't had COVID and, social justice issues, Black Lives Matter sort of, front and center when he took office, the climate and climate change, that would have been his number one issue. He and Jill said that, they're very concerned, and he keeps doing things that are really, really important and groundbreaking. The IRA is huge, and the fact that he earmarked this money to get rid of, lead in our drinking water, absolutely huge for our children, huge for their health. And, as Michael Regan, who's the current EPA head, says, this lead in our water, this is a generational health crisis. And now, these municipalities are being given the subsidies, and, Biden wants this to happen, by 2031. I mean, he announced it in 2024. It's supposed to happen in a decade, so they have until 2034. But his deal is like, let's get this done by 2031. And it's super ambitious. It's going to be costly. The $9 billion isn't going to be enough. That it's estimated it could, cost potentially $45 billion. It's huge, but it's really a step in the right direction. So,
yeah, as I say, I appreciate you underscoring it here occasionally. That's the situation with lead. So some aggressive steps being taken, and also you make the case so well for the historic negative effect that these lead quantities have, even modest lead quantities, on developmental issues, etc. So what else do you have today?
Okay, so the second piece of which I think is super, super important, because humidity is really affecting us right now. You know, these last two hurricanes, I mean, this is a warming ocean, so the warm water is evaporating into a hotter atmosphere. A hotter atmosphere can hold more water vapor. And that drives these storms, which are absolutely crazy. And I just want to point out this one little bit of science, because I think it's so interesting. And then I really want to talk about air conditioners. But, you know, with Helene, how Hurricane Helene was hugely impactful inland. And often by the time a hurricane gets inland, it's run out of juice. You know, it's dropped all its water. It doesn't have that. Well, now they're calling the soil a brown ocean. And what happens is what happened in North Carolina is there'd been a big tons and tons of rain fell right before Hurricane Helene came in. So you had this really water-clogged soil, brown ocean, full of water, warm temperatures, and that water that was in the soil was evaporating up into the atmosphere, and that's what regenerated the force of Hurricane Helene and made it so impactful in such a disastrous way for all those small towns, you know, Asheville and that whole swath of small towns in inland North Carolina. So water vapor is big, and what people don't realize is, you know, water is super important, but water vapor is a more prevalent greenhouse gas than CO2. CO2 represents.
Wow, it is? That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's been really important because the water vapor, you know, as a greenhouse gas, you know, like a blanket wrapping the earth, has kept it temperate and livable. But now what's happening is there's too much water vapor in the atmosphere. So just to give listeners an idea, carbon dioxide, that's the one we always talk about. Oh, the terrible, you know, greenhouse gas carbon dioxide. Well, that represents 0.04% of air volume. Water vapor can be up to 3% of air volume. And so we're really seeing this with the humidity, which has become such a killer in Southeast Asia, India, and Latin America, you know, countries that are really hot, and then they have this incredible level of humidity. You know, they say you want to have, you know, humidity at 60%, that's sort of livable. Well, Mumbai, they have days when not only is the air temperature, you know, 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit, but they've got 70% humidity that they're dealing with. Now, the big thing that's happening in India is they're getting richer, which is good, and they can afford more air conditioners, also good, because no one can live like that. It's awful, awful, awful. But the problem is the AC units that you put in a window, so they're huge energy suckers. So they're putting more carbon into the atmosphere because India, you know, predominantly, you know, their energy comes from burning coal. And they're incredibly inefficient. And so, yes, they're really vital, but they can't suck the humidity out of the atmosphere fast enough. What happens is, to get the water vapor that's in a room to its dew point, which means when it turns into condensation, so it comes out of the air in the room and drips out, you know, as condensation as water, outside, you have to get the room as cold as 66 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, then you've got to have, you know, then it's unlivable because it's freezing in there. So there's this really cool Colorado-based US think tank. They're called RMI, and they came up with a prize a few years ago. This is a think tank that was established in 1970 during the oil crisis. And now what they're looking at is not the oil crisis, but the energy crisis, and in particular, how do we cool this heating planet, and how do we deal with humidity for all these billions, it's billions of people who are living in these really hot, wet places. So there's this new prototype, and rather than just being a cooler, it's a humidity gobbler. It's sucking the humidity out of the atmosphere. And it's going to be an absolute game changer, because it won't rely on the person being the operator, you know, turning down the heat, you know, the thermostat on the air conditioning unit. It will be sensing what's happening the whole time. And rather than a heat pump or an air conditioner, which just has one coil that it uses to cool the air, to get it to its, you know, the water vapor to its dew point, so it leaves as condensation. This has 2 coils, and it has sensors, so it's all the time how much water is in the room. Okay, it's late in the day, the family are home, they're cooking, people are sweating, because in the middle of the day, the house doesn't, might have the heat coming from the sun, but it doesn't have, the human beings who live in that room, bringing all their humidity in. And it's really, this could really, really be a game changer. So the idea is to get them online as soon as possible. They're hoping within 5 years. They look like a heat pump. They're sort of longer than a heat pump. There might be a picture in one of the links that I sent you guys. Well, there is actually in the Washington
Albert, can you
Post
rally the picture?
Just because it's kind of interesting to see. And when you see, one family living in a 1-bedroom apartment trying to, make their lives livable using one, window air conditioning unit. I mean, people in Mumbai, families are spending up to 10% of their income to try and stay cool. And this is only using their cooling units from 11 at night until the morning, just while they're sleeping, because they're so expensive. And so what they're saying with India is there's going to be, they're going to have 1 billion more air conditioning units at the rate that they are industrializing and becoming richer. And the need for air conditioners, there are going to be 1 billion more of them just in India alone. Right now in the world, I think there are 1.2 billion domestic air conditioning units in the world. So this is almost doubling it. And this is just, in one country. And this will increase India's energy needs by 50% from what they're using right now. And that's all energy. This is just on cooling. And as I said before, this is a country that, most of their energy comes from burning coal. So it's really a game changer if we can, get the humidity out of the air. Because when it's humid, we've talked about this before on the show and why heat is such a killer, and what we're facing right now is our bodies, we cannot sweat when, so this is a family that they're talking about who's, so this is the unit. So you see, it looks like the heat pump. It's a bit longer than that. And they're testing it and they're testing it in India. They're not testing it in a Northern Hemisphere country. They're testing it where the humidity is really bad. 20 miles outside of Mumbai, they're in an apartment building, testing this. So this is scientists from India. RMI had a competition, a Chinese company and a Japanese cooling company. They won the prizes, and now they've got this team of scientists all working together, basically to do something that is going to be so important. And now let's get to the sort of the meat and potatoes of this thing. These units use 75% less energy than traditional
That's
units.
unreal.
75% less. Huge. And did you want to say more, Mark?
No, I was just saying and it does all of these things that you talk about that are independent of just cooling the environment that people are in, and it's 75% cheaper.
Yeah, because
wow.
this was the thing. Like, no, 70% uses 75% less energy. So the
Less energy,
unit will
sorry.
be more expensive to buy, but then it will work out over time because you won't be spending
your energy costs are
of your
energy costs are
income.
reduced by 75%. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Exactly. Yes, you're right. Your math is good. Solid.
But you're also right. We're both right that the unit itself is more expensive, but the costs obviously catch up because you're saving so much on energy.
Yeah.
And I just was going to say one other thing. You speak so well about the fact that heat and humidity is a tremendous stressor on the body. I mean, it kills so many people.
Horrible.
It causes heart attacks. It's bad for the brain. It's bad for your lungs. I mean, all of these things that are stressors on you physically, even if you don't buy the farm, you have real damage done from the environment. So this is, again, transformative, to use the word again.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that's really important about it, and this is huge. So right now, what people don't realize is that our air conditioning and refrigeration is causing twice as many emissions as airlines. So 4% of emissions, I think airlines are more like 3, but 4% of global emissions come from cooling and refrigerants. And this is because, okay, so just to do a little bit of history, we got the Montreal Protocol because they were using chlorofluorocarbons in refrigerators. And those were causing the big hole in the ozone layer. So then we got the Montreal Protocol and we went, hey, we have to stop using chlorofluorocarbons. Instead, we'll use hydrofluorocarbons, or maybe it was chlorohydrofluorocarbons. Now we use hydrofluorocarbons. But those are incredible greenhouse gases. I mean, they're hundreds of thousands of times worse than CO2. So the Kigali Protocol, which happened in Rwanda in 2016, and one of the big people who made that happen was John Kerry, but that called for the phasing out of hydrofluorocarbons. So that was really huge. And so one of the other things about these dehumidifying cooling units is they won't be using those either. So they won't be using this terrible greenhouse gas coolant, because what happens is refrigeration. I mean, they talk about how much greenhouse gas comes just from the refrigerators that we have in our supermarkets. You know, the hydrofluorocarbons leak out of them. And it was sort of awful that we fixed the hole in the ozone, but we actually exacerbated climate change. We switched from one bad, chemical to another one that we thought was better. And yes, the hole in the ozone is repairing, but then we exacerbated our greenhouse gas emissions. So this cooling unit will address that. It doesn't use this damaging chemical, and it uses 75% less energy. So I hope some big, billionaire or some big tech company, or philanthropist comes in and goes, I'm going to finance this for the billions of people in the world who, need to have a cooler, less humid.
Sure, to take advantage of it. I mean, there's no shortage of those who would do such a thing. I think of, Gates among them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So those are two good news stories for today.
Yeah, that's really, really good news. And, for those just joining us, Belinda's an environmental journalist and eco-journalist, and she began her relationship with us really talking almost exclusively about good news stories, which are hard to find when it comes to the climate and environment as things sort of get trashed here on Earth. But slowly, she's had to include some sort of crises that are also emerging. So it's nice, is all I'm saying, to get back to some real positivity that you shared with us today. Really cool. So these are, again, and one is a technological breakthrough, the AC, and the lead thing. Again, that's realizing that there is a growing beast that needs to be handled, and that takes a legislative muscle, and in the case of Biden, an executive muscle to actually get it done. Really, really great.
Yeah. Political will. We need the right kind of political will. And like I said, these should be bipartisan issues, clean water, clean energy. I mean, this is all our health. Everyone is affected by this stuff. So
I do have a quick correction. I want to correct myself because Scott Pruitt was a horrible guy. Think of him as a mini Trump trying to undo all the environmental regulations in his state of Oklahoma. He was a state senator there, and he was undoing all the environmental regulations, closed down the regulatory environmental agency in Oklahoma. This Scott Pruitt, why do I mention Scott Pruitt? We were talking about him at the beginning of this segment, and he went on to run the EPA, okay? So he is anti-environment, anti any kind of environmental regulation. But he did sue the EPA, as I was saying. So all of that is true. But I think I said he was a coal industry lobbyist, and that's not what he was. He was never a coal industry lobbyist. Now, he did sue on behalf of some coal industry and energy industries in Oklahoma. He sued the EPA, but he was not a coal industry lobbyist. He resigned under incredible ethical breaches, even for the Trump administration. He was replaced by Wheeler. Wheeler was, and he ran the EPA, a coal industry lobbyist. So I just had my EPA guys a little bit confused because they did, in the middle of the term, kind of swap roles. But so there was a coal industry lobbyist running the EPA, but it was not Pruitt. It was Wheeler who succeeded him. Belinda, I love this segment. I love that we talk about stuff that I think is so very important, and I'm really grateful for your time and your patience always with us. So thank you so much.
It's always my pleasure.
Belinda
Thanks so
Weymouth,
much,
everybody.
Mark. Okay, bye everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. That's It's the Planet Stupid for today.
More
It's the planet stupid. No, it's the planet stupid.
next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.